While the presentation spoke about the innovation journey and the movement from exploration to scale, we can't help but wonder about how this is eventually executed on the ground. While basic ideation is one side of the coin, the other side carries the weight of implementation. Success is, after all, measured by actual value creation. In saying this, I'd like to move into our next segment, a fireside chat on mobilizing employee led innovation from India. In this chat, we'll be exploring how employees can be invigorated to innovate and create real value by focusing on innovation programs in a holistic manner. Joining me for this chat is Mr. Venkat Raju. Venkat runs PVTM Solutions, a boutique consulting and advisory services firm focused on corporate innovation and digital transformation. PVTM's client base includes major multinationals across several industries, including energy, retail, healthcare, and so on. He's a serial entrepreneur and a seasoned corporate executive at Fortune 500 corporations across financial services, high tech, and telecom. He is an active angel investor, advisor, and board member in 70 plus startups currently, and is also an advisor to select funds, incubators, and accelerators. Thank you so much for joining us today, Venkat.
Good morning. Thank you, Rashmi. Glad to be here.
Glad
Look
to
forward to
have
the
you.
discussion.
Same here, Venkat. I'd like to kickstart today's chat by asking you a very important question on everyone's minds this morning. Why do you believe that innovation implementation is such a challenge? Why is it drawing so much of our attention towards it? And is the challenge of value creation and implementation higher for a GCOE considering its construct?
Hmm. So the key word here is implementation. We are all aware of so many corporations embarked on innovation programs. Most of them kind of stall at the ideation stage or perhaps go forward with some POCs and pilots. But how many actually truly are operationalized? And when I say operationalized, it is to generate real business value. And this does not happen. And I've been spending quite some time with several corporations, despite the best of intent, resources, commitments, etc. Successes, real business value out of innovation programs have been far fewer than it should be. And the key one point I attribute that to when I look at successful innovation programs versus not so successful ones, it has to do with the maturity levels of innovation in these corporations. So most of you should be familiar with the capability maturity model, and we don't have such a industry standard here as far as innovation, but those of us who've been practitioners, and there's tons of research behind it, there are about like 5 levels of innovation maturity. General awareness about what an innovation is, and the next stage is about tippy-toeing, making some feeble attempts at innovation. And next one is about experimenting with some ad hoc processes and ad hoc initiatives. And the fourth stage is much more formalized. There is like a clear pattern. There's a clear design. There are a set of activities to drive through to fruition. And the last one is institutionalized. That means it's almost running like on a auto mode because it's been so embedded into the organization at every level. Most organizations, in my view, and I'm now talking globally, operate at about a 3 or 2, and very few at a 4 or 5 level. And when it comes to GCOEs, this is particularly bad. Even those organizations that operate at a 3, for example, when you look at the innovation maturity at a their GCOE here in India, it is probably at a 1 or a 2, and it need not necessarily be so. So unless the GCC takes a proactive step in terms of changing this sorry state of affairs will continue. So again, the key word is implementation. Very few successful implementations have happened. When I talk about implementation, this is about fundamental innovations, the way Divya talked about. That means a launch of a new set of products, for example, a fundamental change in your business model, things of that nature which are highly impactful. And GCOEs, I believe, are positioned to do that if only they can think about improving their maturity and capacity as far as innovations are concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I definitely echo the part of being able to move across the maturity scale. But in coming back to that very focal point of improving across the maturity stages, how does the organization identify where this difficulty arises from? What would you say are some sources of the difficulty, and how can a center make focused efforts to overcome these?
Sure. Again, Divya touched on this. She called the GCC or the GCOE charter. And that is a problem, in my opinion, because you have a certain remit and a mandate for your GCC or a GCOE. You've been set up for, let's say, become the analytics center of excellence, or the merchandising function has been moved to India, and that's all what you do. And you are expected to hire talent, you are expected to deliver on expected business results for day-to-day operations per se. And that by itself is a huge challenge. As we all know, the GCC leaders are here. But the point is, if this is indeed the remit and mandate, somehow everyone looks at you with that kind of a lens, saying, deliver on this successfully, and job is done. Now you're trying to add on this so-called innovation. So if you are struggling with delivering on what is quote unquote mandatory activities, now here comes something called innovation, and that falls under the discretionary bucket. And whether it is budget challenge and other challenges, these kind of items get missed out. So even if the intent is there, the practical realities of the process and how the GCOE is constructed prevents GCOE to spearheading and going forward with innovation. The second item is being away, thousands of miles away from headquarters. So you truly are sort of disconnected from the main strategies and the innovation thoughts that's going on in headquarters among the CXOs out there. And that's a problem, especially when it comes to, even if you are running some small innovation programs, how well is it aligned with the corporate vision, corporate strategy, corporate innovation programs? And that lack of alignment prevents a GCOE to be part of that and successfully doing innovation programs. And the last piece is more to do with the talent. Not that India has fantastic talent, we all know that, but it goes back to the construct of the GCOE. If indeed you've been set up for running analytics only, that means you lack the multidisciplinary capability that is truly required for innovation. Most people associate innovation with like some engineers, but true innovation happens when there is diversity. And so there has to be a real planned, methodical way in terms of transforming the GCOE and the GCC to run innovation properly. So the issues that I highlighted are real, but at the same time, I want to also say I have seen very, very successful innovation programs run out of India with huge global impact. So it is possible when there is a will and when there is the right kind of leadership and the support infrastructure. Yes, it's possible.
That's great. I actually want to double click on the fact that you mentioned having that awareness of where the center currently is. And something that we speak a lot about at Zinnov is also doing that basic assessment or that evaluation to understand where the center stands, say vis-a-vis the industry or other GCOEs in the same demographics. So it's so important to assess and also benchmark yourself across the industry and gain what we call situational awareness. It's something that our team uses a lot to say, where do you currently stand and what are some possible trajectories for you to move ahead. So I think that you really framed that quite beautifully, Venkat. And in saying this, I want to move into our next question, which is, Do you see the challenge of implementation varying basis the type of innovation? So we explored in the presentation that we have, incremental, we have transformative, we
Sure.
have breakthrough, and they all vary across from each other. But when we talk about these different kinds, do you think it's easier to deploy or uptake an incremental innovation versus transformative or breakthrough? And how can we account for the difference?
Sure. Big difference. So incremental innovation could happen in areas under your own control. That means you don't need to get some approval, buy-in from somebody else. So for example, you're running a site here and you say, I am going to fundamentally change my procurement process here. I am going to realize some business process efficiency in dealing with vendor management.
Mhm.
I am going to turn my building with high energy efficiency. Now, these are things, don't get me wrong, these are very important, value added things, and you can call it innovation, but certainly they are driving efficiencies and creating value for the local center. The point is, these are incremental, but true innovation, the impact, the larger, I mean, Divya touched on this also about the value creation at the highest levels of impact to the entire organization globally.
Mhm.
That would happen only when you are aligned with the corporate strategies and how you fit into that, and are you in a position to do that. And GCOEs do have certain issues and constraints that I talked about earlier, but GCOEs also do have some unfair advantages. Let me give a couple of examples. So I'm very familiar with this European corporation having a major GCC here, and one of their business units were thinking about launching a new product in Africa, for example. And they were thinking about how, where to do the innovation, understand, etc., and to go forward. And the center here in Bangalore stepped up and said, look, you provide the product and the business expertise and the cover and the sponsorship, if you will. I have the talent. There is no reason why folks in Paris are better aware of the African market compared to the folks in Bangalore. We will step up and do it. And indeed, they did. And the innovation was launched here, which was truly turned into a real product offering into Africa. So that is one great success story I can talk about. Another one, the way you want to position this, the coming back to the unfair advantage. Innovation, as we know, is a set of experiments. That means if you run 10 experiments, chances are two are going to be successful. When I talk about successful, all the way through to fruition and completion for realizing real business value out in the market, shall we say. And 2 out of 10 is not bad if you are indeed embarked on true innovation. Now, think about this. This leader here, the country head, made the case saying, look, we have $10 million for this initiative. And if you're doing it in New York, you're going to be at best run 10 experiments and you're going to get probably 2 successful outcomes. If it's going to be run out of here in India, we can run 50 experiments. That means possibly 10 possible successful outcomes. So for the same amount,
Mhm.
we are significantly increasing the number of successful outcomes. Obviously, it's not just only money, it's also you need to provide the level of trust and the comfort that indeed you have the capacity, the capability, and the talent to really run a innovation program of that kind of magnitude, but it is possible.
Yeah, that's great. So, actually, in fact, a few months ago, we ran a survey across GCOEs in India to understand innovation spends, to understand how GCOEs are prioritizing their innovation spends across the different types. And we saw very evidently that incremental innovation is an area of preference. But in saying this, we also are aware that incremental or core tends to be low risk, low return, whereas transformative and breakthrough can be considered as high risk, high return. And I
Right.
actually want to draw attention to something that's happening right now. So Divya spoke about Apple and how Apple has a mixed portfolio that way.
Mhm.
And as something that we all know, for those of us who use Apple products, we know that the iPhone has a lot of incremental changes. They remove the home button. Each iOS upgrade has like small incremental changes. But now, if Apple is going to be entering the EV space, which is so competitive, it's going to be a high risk game. And if it works out, it's going to be high return. So I think that's going to be something all of us are very excited to see how it turns out.
Sure.
But in saying that, what does so we spoke about innovation hubs. What is the global organization looking for from a center to stand out in terms of value contributions? How does it become a hub? And more importantly, do you think that a GCOE can take charge of this conversation and drive the story rather than waiting for the HQ to drive their own fate?
Absolutely true. It all comes down to, I touched on few things. That means you are already doing very well in terms of what is expected of you. You are delivering on your promises, the set goals, whatever reason the GCC and the GCOE has been set up in the first place. Now that you've done that, you have gained credibility, you have a seat at the table, you should be making a case as to why for some of the, I gave some examples on how certain leaders have been able to take on additional innovation charters, if you will, responsibilities. I'll give you another example. So, for example, this large global energy major, and the board made a decision saying by 2025, 10% of our top line is going to come from quote unquote renewable energy. Again, trust me, this is like an oil major.
Mhm.
The leadership here in India stood up and said, look, India is embarking on a massive push towards renewables, EV, etc., etc. We have, so India happens to be one of the 3 R&D hubs in addition to Amsterdam and Houston. They stood up and said, we would do the contribution towards this strategy. And now you have the alignment saying, look, this is a board mandated strategy for the company. And here we are positioning ourselves saying, I have a R&D lab. This is the kind of talent that we have. And this is kind of the ecosystem that we have in terms of startups and et cetera, et cetera. And they made a case for getting a piece of that innovation pie, if you will, and they have embarked on that. So my point here is you need to be aligned. So alignment is very important, and your ability to execute, the capacity to do that, and you have to make a convincing case as to why this is a better place to do it compared to probably two or three other options, if you will. So
Mhm.
it comes down to leveraging what we have, your strengths, and highlighting that. And obviously, uh, it is comes down to delivery. I do see a correlation between the age of a GCC and the ability to do such transformative product development, R&D, and innovation. I think because you have established a successful history or a track record and taken on more and more additional responsibilities. So there is clearly support at multiple CXO level in headquarters, so that like when you're going and pitching for one more, chance of them looking at you favorably is higher, not to mention the other advantages you bring to the table.
Mhm. No, that's very interesting. I think a lot of our attendees will also be able to relate to that. But if we look at that gap, what are those corporates that have the most successful internal innovation programs? What do they possess that perhaps the others are missing? Could you shed some light on that?
Sure. The first one is this innovation culture, and it's a topic by itself. We can spend next 30 minutes talking about it. But uh, we understand what a innovation culture is, meaning give them space to fail. It's okay to fail. It should be encouraging and supportive of bottom up ideas. You have the kind of talent that can think out of the box. I touched on alignment. I touched on the capability maturity in innovation. That means you have well structured programs, defined curriculums, defined criteria for selecting participants for such innovation, a focus on results, a focus on outcomes. The KPIs you draw up for innovation is very different from the standard performance KPIs you would have. There are things around, failure rates, which is kind of unheard of in like your traditional performance measurements. But there's a whole uh, set of activities and interactions, the supportive environment, etc., etc., is very important. And one can tell the difference between people who are mouthing the word innovation and culture, etc., versus those who are practicing. And the maturity index I'm talking about is kind of would help if an organization truly indeed wants to progress on this innovation journey, then it should really methodically go through the process, because setting up the right culture does not happen overnight. That means it comes down to employer branding. It comes down to, what are you here for? You should be attracting talent, not for people who are coming for a higher pay or a regular career growth, but also an opportunity where they can really come and experiment and innovate. So there's a whole set of things across the organization, from HR to finance to how, for example, hierarchies work, how, for example, employees interact between departments, across departments, with headquarters, and so on and so forth. So all these come together, all based on a sound capability model with the right kind of processes, etc., is very important.
Yeah, I'm actually grinning right now because you emphasize that making a supportive environment where it's okay to fail. Because I recently came across this concept of return on failure. So
Yeah,
while return on investment is this universally
that's
applied
right.
concept that everyone knows, I think return on failure very beautifully
Excellent metric, right? So what did
right.
we learn? What are the key learnings? Okay, and that is absolutely important for really
Yeah.
innovative organizations. Absolutely.
Absolutely no. And I think innovation and creation is something that you don't know if you're good or bad at unless you try
Unless
it.
you do it.
And giving them the room to fail
Right.
really helps us identify who is our highest potential employees versus those that don't require as much attention and effort. And I'm going to come back to that in a later question. But in saying this, I want to ask you a very pointed question, speaking to your experience. So, Venkat, you've worked with Entrepreneur First and you've mentored a number of startups. What are some obvious considerations that innovators are missing while designing and executing such programs?
Sure. I can talk about the experience at Entrepreneur First. For those of you who are not aware what EF does, it attracts aspiring entrepreneurial talent, and then put them together and turn their ideas into real businesses and funds them and launches them out in the world. And it's a UK headquarters company with operations in multiple countries, etc. So in terms of attraction, there are two types of people EF looks for. One is what it calls those who have the edge. So typical talent that comes on board is like somebody with a deep technologist or a deep scientist with PhD in a certain domain, and they have tremendous amount of knowledge, and only they will be able to create some differentiated products, for example, that others cannot. uh, or the other type of people with the edge is those who have been in industry in a certain domain for several years, understand the landscape, understand the gaps in the industry, and they have some unique insights that is not apparent to others, and they believe that they can create a product and a solution to fill that industry. So these are folks what are called like edge people. The second type of people EF looks for are what are called catalysts. Catalysts are kind of generalists, but they can maximize the value of these edge people. In other words, in terms of shaping their ideas, thinking, etc., into a large business, into the right business model, in terms of positioning it right and helping scale that operation. So ideally, EF does what does is it pairs up one edge person at one catalyst person, and they become like the co-founders, and the startup is launched. And it's done a pretty good it has a pretty good track record in terms of the number of successful outcomes that it has had. Now, applying that into the corporate setting here, now you are looking for the right kind of people, who they are. And if you're careful, you're looking for both types. These edge type people who have unique technical knowledge or a deep product knowledge, and then the others with the business process knowledge, business domain knowledge, and pair them up. And clearly, for a corporate innovation to work, then you also need people who are the facilitators, who can like deal with finance, who can deal with headquarters, etc. So it is choosing the right kind of people to participate in your innovation programs is very, very important. But I also want to caution that innovation programs should not be run based on select few people, because if you really want to create a culture, that means everyone should be somehow part of this innovation journey. So that means the job description of every single employee, regardless of the level, there should be an innovation component, if you will, and identify how best they can contribute to the overall innovation thing that's happening at the GCOE, at the GCC. And Divya did talk about a portfolio approach. Perhaps there are 5, 6, 8 different initiatives. See how you can integrate, embed each one of your employees into at least one such initiative.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's extremely insightful also to our attendees. But if we shift our lens to the employee angle now, Venkat, how can we truly stimulate employees to effectively contribute to a center's innovation efforts?
Yeah.
And how can a center inspire more employees to get a volume of employees? We spoke about the DNA aspect, but
Mhm.
how do we also get the quantity of employees to participate?
Sure. Well, it's a little too late perhaps, but make sure when you are hiring people, you are hiring for with this also in mind. I mean, normal hiring practices, you look for cultural fit and obviously the knowledge and the skills to fill the position that you need, but look for people who are willing to think outside the box, who are going to challenge conventional wisdoms. And obviously, when you're looking for people and like they, so hopefully the talent that you have are ambitious people looking to enhance their career, grow, and do really great things, and it's not just for the sake of some compensation. Okay, so look for maximize such talent in your employee pool, and that's very, very important. And I personally know of several entrepreneurs who started startups, and they said, look, I did not want to do the startup because I know the risks involved in the sacrifices. I would have rather joined a corporate, but the bureaucracy and other things and inability for me to go and do some creative work forced me to become an entrepreneur. So there is such very good talent available. So if you are able to create an environment to attract that kind of talent, the returns are going to be immense, because they are going to be clearly doing the so-called daytime job, the regular things that's going to be expected of them, but they are going to be putting the additional effort in some of these innovation programs. So create a supportive environment. That means it's not just like the site leader saying we are going to do innovation, everybody is willing, should participate, but the support infrastructure has to be there. The line manager cannot say, okay, so and so is my top performing employee, I can't afford that person to spend some time on these innovation efforts because I have a deadline to create. Or the HR and the finance departments coming in and providing the support saying we are going to cover for this. So this has to be well thought through. If indeed your site you want to transform into a innovative environment, and the culture and the support infrastructure is there for you to support. So finally, it comes down to success. If you have a track record of successful innovation led outcomes, for example, you do have role models to look up to who have been innovation champions and they have been duly recognized and rewarded. All these things come together to create a environment and atmosphere that is going to continue to attract the best kind of talent. And this is like a very good cycle to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen in the past so many instances of where individuals leave startups or organizations to really go out on their own and, innovate elsewhere. So I think what you said really resonates with that entire instance of being able to keep the right potential within your organization. And since we're coming up on time, and I want to ask you the last question before we move into the Q&A session and we address audience questions.
Mhm.
When can we say that a center has successfully built a culture of innovation? Because that's really the theme of today's session.
Right.
And what are some essential elements of such a culture?
So clearly, we talk about C-level support. I would add C-level sponsorship. It's not just support. In fact, they are actively there sponsoring, putting their name behind these efforts. And that's very important to have that kind of top down signal, more than a signal, resources, support, and batting for you. And that's very, very important. Equally, bottom up. So that means there is an environment where, employee ideas, other things are bubbling up. And then any idea is going to be put through a process to validate indeed this idea is good or bad. But this kind of top down and bottom up should be both there. And most important, the biggest resistance or the biggest issue happens to be due to the mid-level management friction. So to the extent that mid-level management is also has bought into this, and there is like a incentive structure for all of, we are all in this together, and we are creating value through this innovation, and there is benefits to be spread out widely, and there is recognition and rewards. It's absolutely critical to have this bottom up and top down, including support infrastructures, which I talked about. Um, there is some people set up a so-called innovation department and R&D labs, and there is still a need for that. But that innovation unit should be embedded within each business unit, every department, for example, so that it is kind of pervasive. And I did touch on employees feeling having a safe space to fail, and failure should not be looked down upon, but also as an opportunity for people to take the risks and try true innovation experiments, if you will. And we need to come up with the right kind of metrics and the KPIs which is relevant for innovation. Last but not least, I touched on the profiles who are likely to be successful in this, the guys with the edge, the people who are catalysts, and performance reviews. We have HR department does probably quarterly, annual, whatever the case may be. The chances are the top performers are likely to be the top performers for innovation as well, but not necessarily so. There are some top performers who are very good in your day-to-day operation, very structured discipline, but then like there could be perhaps some people who are, let me call them mini disruptors, challenging conventional wisdoms. You need to cherry pick such people and combine them, channel them right for your innovation experiments to succeed. So look at it holistically, have the right processes, have the right structure and the governance, and you'll be successful.
That's great. That's super interesting. I think, especially in a time like this where all of us are continuously trying to innovate and disrupt. So that was very insightful. Venkat, we've got a number of questions from our audience members,
Sure.
and the audience keep them coming. If we can't get to them now, we'll definitely take a stab at them
Sure.
and respond to you later. But some key questions that my team has highlighted for us to
Go ahead.
address. How do we judge on the employee value proposition we need to offer? Should it be basis the idea, like best business case, novelty, IP related, or is there a different approach?
You can judge it. So let's call it, it is a continuous process all the way from new ideas, ideation through to maturation to translation to what I finally called operationalization into real business value and outcomes. So clearly, a idea that has gone all the way through to completion, such person should be rewarded very differently from people who have come up with ideas and that probably kind of stopped somewhere, but
Mhm.
the idea itself has matured to this level. shows there is like potential in such people. So you need to be actively encouraging. For me, no idea is a bad idea. Maybe there is a learning from everything. And if just for the participation itself, you need to be recognizing and rewarding the employee, and progressively you can set certain kind of a compensation structure based on the value delivered, for example.
Great. Moving into
And
our
some
next.
companies go all the way into true intrapreneurship, turn the
Mhm.
ideas and, in fact, actually fund them and launch them into a separate business altogether. So I've seen, a variety of models on how
Right.
best to reward such employees.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our next question is running a company and growing it are different skill sets. One is operational, and the other is possibly closer to doing new things,
Mhm.
such as growth. How can a leader running a company keep an eye open for innovation and influence the organization on a regular basis?
Sure. So this happens with, let's start with a startup, for example. At its initial stage, it is more in a innovation, experimental phase. It goes through maturation, identifies product market fit, and it takes more and more money. And then it says, I'm in a scale up mode at this point. You're looking at now business operations and business metrics and the margins and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, as you grow, you are now always looking to enhance your market, your total addressable market. That means you are always looking for adjacent market.
Right.
So even to go to an adjacent market, you are experimenting, or you are coming up with a new product line. You are again experimenting. So even in the most mature businesses, there are going to be certain mature business units and then new business units. So it's a combination of both. And when you're looking at it at a portfolio level, if you are the CEO, for example, you're looking at certain businesses, and there it is much more on operational metrics and operational efficiencies and maximizing the profits out. And there are going to be certain business units and products that are like, at a very early stage, idea stage, and it has to be given the right kind of fuel and juice. So
Mhm.
it all depends.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got one really interesting question which I want to ask you. Are we saying that we should look out for disruptive innovations rather than smaller leaps in the journey? Aren't smaller leaps important too? And how do we balance the two?
Sure, smaller leaps are absolutely important. I went back to our a while ago. I talked about gaining credibility, gaining trust that indeed you can do that. These smaller leaps and other things, keep doing it and increase the profile. Make the small into medium, medium to big, so that headquarters and others can see the value that's you provided. But true innovation comes from breakthrough innovation. So that means for you to be totally recognized and rewarded, I think you should really shoot for the big one. And that does not necessarily mean you're going to stop on the small things. Incremental things, keep doing that, but think about this as a process,
Mhm.
or a journey in terms of gaining credibility for your breakthrough, while at the same time be conscious on where you are in terms of the maturity level, so that like even your small incremental things, you can probably do it in a much more rigorous, repeatable format, if you will.
Right. No, that's great because we emphasize repeatable, scalable innovations
Yeah.
as well. So I think it's great that you spoke about that. Another question that we got, alluding to the DNA aspect of an employee, the question says not every employee could contribute to innovation. Don't you think it's unrealistic to have innovation in a job description?
uh, I beg to differ. It all depends on how you define the job description. So, for example, you are hiring somebody in the finance department to be a controller. The person is expected to just make sure we all know what a controller is supposed to do, etc. But, for example, you also add saying this is basically all the expectation. But by the way, we encourage you to think outside the box and how to improve our financial performance, how to do better. The point is that has to be drilled day one into that person, so that the person feels, one, I am being asked, I am being empowered to come up with ideas, and in the domain that I operate in, let me see what I can do. or that person could be a participant in an innovation program where typically it is like some techies and product folks, and most of them don't really have a financial head. Now this person can participate in that innovation program and contributing and adding value. So I refuse to believe that any person cannot be fit into innovation. That said, there are going to be certain people who are probably do not want to do that. That's a different issue. But regardless of your job description, role, level, I do believe everyone can make a contribution in this innovation journey.
Great. Another question we have is alluding to the portfolio approach that we were speaking about. It says, how can a GCOE take a portfolio approach?
Great point. I mean, it all depends on how big your GCOE, what's your charter, and if you are like very single dimensional on certain things only. So let's say a GCOE is doing analytics. Now, analytics, as we know, you can do predictive analytics, cognitive analytics, whether it is on, let's say, customer churn to supplier management to pricing, a variety of things. The question is, this is the domain I have, but I can apply this expertise in different business units, different use cases, for example, and then come up with a portfolio approach and saying, I can provide some innovation of analytics driven innovation in supply chain optimization. I'm making this up. It all depends on how you can think through where you are starting from and go forward. Obviously, you're confined or constrained by the kind of people you have and the domain you operate in. But when it comes to innovation, it's all about imagination, how far you want to take this and how broad you want to take it.
Great. Yeah. And I think the best innovations come when you think beyond what you know in a limited or restricted manner. Another question that we've got is that the most challenging and biggest hindrances to future innovations are current products that are so successful. How do we break the wall of a comfort zone and make the leadership realize the need for long-term innovation?
There's tons of research and books on this, including Innovator's Dilemma, which is well known. You should be willing to cannibalize your products. Otherwise, you are going to completely be disrupted by somebody else. So I know it is easier said than done. Some of us do have responsibilities on quarterly investment calls and etc. So disruption is not is a very touchy, difficult topic to do. But successful companies have been able to figure out how best to do that, and saying, I'm going to either I cannibalize it. I would rather cannibalize it myself rather than some disruptor coming and doing it. Or even a shift in a business model. And Larry Ellison is famous to say, cloud is like is a joke or something. And then like he completely shifted the ERP licensing model into a cloud delivery model. Obviously, it was very painful to go through that transition. The point is, you don't have a choice in today's world. But there is like enough of good research out there on saying how large successful companies with flourishing products, with flourishing businesses, how they've been able to continuously reposition, transform themselves so that like they stay ahead of the disruptors. It's possible. Again, and this is probably a challenge you can give it to come up with innovative ideas on how to do this. And I think the talent is out there to think this through and get it done.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think we'll tackle our last question of the session before we move into the closing note. Do different industries have different innovation life cycles? I think this is an interesting one.
Sure.
In terms of time, how does the industry affect the way we look at innovation?
Oh, absolutely true. And there's also a difference between software versus hardware. There is a difference between manufacturing versus e-commerce. There's a difference between industries that need to go through some regulatory hurdles, etc. So obviously, there is no one size fit all. And innovation, I do believe, is some of the frameworks that Divya talked about, the capability, the innovation maturity model I talked about. obviously has to be customized to your industry and to your organization, taking into account the variants and the variables, and you need to customize it. So that means each company should be embarking on this innovation, taking into account your situation, your context, and do it right.
Great. I think that sums it up. And it was absolutely fantastic speaking to you, Venkat. Always a pleasure working with you. We hope that the points that you offered during the past half an hour empower more centers to implement successful employee led innovation programs.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank